Hello, Chicago Ideas Week. This is very strange for me because in public radio, we don't often get the Madonna Garth Brooks style microphones, and we don't often get to make a lot of jokes. So bear with me. I may hit you up for money at some point. That's just instinct. Pay me no mind. Glad to be a part of Chicago Ideas Week. I join with all of America, though, in feeling sorry that the people of Chicago only get to have ideas 1 week per year. It's like May, and somebody in Chicago says, well, what should we have for dinner? I don't know. We'll have to wait for October and find out. What should we do this Friday night? So, tacos, go dancing, take a pottery class, and paint the room green. Those are 4 free ideas. You can store those away for later use. I am the author of the book, Dear Luke, We Need to Talk, Darth and Other Pop Culture Correspondences, like G was telling you about. It has a series of letters and emails and messages and dossiers explaining the other side of pop culture that you might not have been aware of, exactly what was in Popeye's spinach. It was military grade. There were horse tranquilizers involved. The ghosts of Pac-Man finally talk about why they're damned to eternally be in a maze, chasing around a sort of god destroyer who is literally all mouth. We haven't heard from them before, and finally, I break that silence. The secret psychological experiments conducted on Gilligan's Island, a military laboratory made to look like an island, uncharted, for purposes of national security. It's a book of folk stories, basically, and when I think about what is trending in pop culture, and I've written a book of pop culture correspondences, I think what trends is folk stories, folklore. I can back up my interest in folklore and pop culture to about the same point in my life, which was 10th grade. And our class was assigned to read The Odyssey by Homer. And I loved it. It was so imaginative. These creatures and characters I had never, ever pictured before in my life were just popping out of the page. I was in heaven. And I asked my teacher, Homer, this guy Homer, he really had it going on. What an imagination. She said, well, he didn't really he had an imagination, but all he was doing is telling the same stories that he had heard told for centuries and generations before that. He was just writing it down, Homer was. Dope. But Greek mythology diverged from a lot of the way that the familiar characters of the gods were treated. For the first time, as this popular culture of Greece developed, they made the gods vain, and they made them boastful, and they made them insecure, and they made them adulterous. They took the familiar icons of their culture and remixed it to form something new. And that is not all that different from how it has been ever since. We've always had this habit of taking something familiar and then thinking, well, what can I do to kind of tinker with that? How can I loosen some screws and, add a spoiler on the back and see what that does? The commedia dell'arte tradition in theater is the same way. Shakespeare, a lot of Shakespeare plays, imaginative though he was, were myths that he knew about, or other stories that other writers had talked about, or other playwrights had talked about. And he got them into an iambic pentameter, which is not easy. Kudos to him. But even in Shakespeare's day, the fancy people sat up way up high in the balcony in the special seats, but down there by the footlights, there was all the cheap seats were towards the front, and that's where just the regular working class people went to absorb their pop culture, which was these same stories that had been going on for generation after generation. And it keeps going. Paul Bunyan, I live in Minnesota. Thank you. I live in Minnesota, and we have this Paul Bunyan fixation there. And is that just the most weird-ass myth you've ever heard? For something to persist as well as that has, like, I know, 40-foot tall lumberjack and a large blue ox. Yes, let's revere that for many generations to come. I don't know why we did it. But these same things, it's the same pattern of taking something familiar, adjusting it, and then turning that into the popular culture of the day. Now, about 100 years ago, things started to change because the technology that we developed allowed us to record things and distribute things. And suddenly, it wasn't the same thing anymore. People weren't just remixing what Paul Bunyan was doing anymore. They were codifying things on radio and on TV and on film. There was only one Ralph Cramden on The Honeymooners. Previous generations would have had multiple Ralph Cramdens fighting centaurs or going into outer space, but that is not part of what was going on anymore. Once we had TV, we narrowed things down. There was only one thing, and it was locked down. And the same thing happened with movies, and it happened with music. I was in the airport today, and I was going through new releases on Spotify, because we have a lot of music on my show, Wits. I want to find out what's going on, what's current, and it makes me feel less like I'm old and middle-aged and dying if I keep up on current music. So I was listening to all this music. There's so much to choose from. I could never, ever, ever listen to it all. It didn't used to be that way not very long ago. Our music decisions in popular music were made by like 12 cokeheads in California. And they got together and they said, let's have everybody love Toto. Let's take Loverboy and shove Loverboy down your throat. And then we all had our throats full of Loverboy, and there wasn't anything we could do about it. But these things, these TV shows, these music, these songs, this became our folklore. This became our folk tale. Instead of Odysseus striving to return home from the war, Mike Reno joined everybody in working for the weekend. Richie Cunningham in 1950s Milwaukee was a cultural hero. Whether he was a tragic hero, I don't know. You'd have to inquire further with smarter people. But we talked about them. We talked about Charlie's Angels. When I was in fourth grade, we would all, like, before class started, there was a debrief on Charlie's Angels and everything that had happened, because for a fourth grade boy, it was fascinating in many, many ways. And it's the same thing that you can find on the AV Club or Vulture or Grantland today, recaps of those shows, probably with better grammar and punctuation than we provided in fourth grade. But this, I posit, dear Chicago friends, is going to be a blip in history. The recorded, codified, singular iconography of a cultural institution is not going to hold, because we remix, we sample, we take what we know and we reinvent it. Someone grabs the iconography and they mess with it, whether it's the Beastie Boys or De La Soul or Lee Scratch Perry. We take these materials and we rip them apart and we build something new out of them. The culture belongs to the culture. And eventually the culture will take it back from whoever is holding it hostage, either through a broadcast or through a copyright or through a contract or through anything. The culture will bring it back. Art and culture, I was thinking about this, are a little like Taco Bell. Because you know you're gonna get tortilla, bean goo, cheese goo, maybe meat goo, in some order. But it's gonna be the same things. Maybe it's a burrito, maybe it's a quesadilla. An enchilada at Taco Bell is just that same series of goos, but with sauce goo dumped all over it. It's the same essential goo. And we want to return to our familiar piles of goo, and so we shall. We invent new goos at the same time here and there because our population expands and our minds expand and we grow, but we'll keep returning and remixing the same folklore, the same popular culture. Now, around the same time that I read the Odyssey, I was listening to a lot of James Taylor because I was a really cool kid who didn't need a girlfriend. And I was listening to James Taylor, and I heard the song, "You've Got a Friend." And you just call out my name and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again, said James Taylor. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call, and I'll be there. You've got a friend. And I thought, that is an amazing friend. If I yell the name James Taylor, he will come running to me. What must it be like to be his friend? And so this kind of rattled around in my head for a good 10 years, 10, 15 years. And then finally one day, I wrote this piece for the McSweeney's website, and McSweeney's and Dave Eggers, to which I owe so much of my creative life. I wrote out this thing where James Taylor issues an update on the friendship promise and says that he will no longer be coming to see you no matter what, because people were just taking advantage of it. They were just wanting to talk about what their boss said or something that happened. They were asking him to pick up some ice cream on the way over, and you people just don't deserve that kind of friend anymore. And then in radio, I worked in journalism for quite a while, and we always have editors going over. You could write something that you think is brilliant radio copy, and then your editor comes in to just destroy it. And some of us were sitting around talking, some of them were editors, about the song Sweet Child O' Mine by Guns N' Roses, which is the worst lyrics a human has ever made. And we were just breaking it down. She's got a smile that it seems to me, couching your idea, reminds me of childhood memories. You can't be reminded of a memory. You're reminded of something or you have a memory. Her hair reminds me of a warm, safe place where as a child I'd hide in a hair cave and pray for the thunder and the rain to quietly pass me by. Axel, thunder isn't going to quietly do anything. It's thunder. And so that turned into another essay that I wrote from the point of view of a heavy metal editor, because I thought, heavy metal musicians need editors. Where do we go now, he asks at one point, which could be an editor's note right there. Where is this song even going? And so I started to write more and more of those. We started performing them on my radio show, Wits, where we'd have the band do the song, and then I'd cut in with me from the point of view of the person writing the letter. For instance, the teacher, the poor beleaguered teachers of Pink Floyd in Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. You say we don't need no education, but your grammar alone proves that you do. You do it. And forgive us for having dark sarcasm in the classroom. It's the only thing that gets teachers through the day. We would be lost without it. People started responding to this very strongly on Wits. It's a furniture piece of the show. It's on every single week. And I think because they started recognizing their folklore, they started recognizing familiar images and familiar characters and the urge to remix them in a new way. And we did the same thing with Fonzie. I don't have time to get into it now, but in my book, he's a wizard who is an immortal wizard and has the ability to manipulate machines with just his fist and attract women constantly, but he's completely riddled with syphilis, just all over the place. It's I asked Random House if we could call the book Fonzie is a Syphilitic Wizard, but they said, no, we think the Star Wars angle is a little bit stronger and doesn't make us throw up. So there will be more of this in the future. More people tearing up ideas that have happened before, turning them into something new, like art supplies. It's just going to keep happening. These will be remixes, and the idea of the ownership of the archetype will dissolve. Copyright will fight. It will build the house on the cliff, and then the ocean will tear down the cliff and suck in the house. Now, finally, they say that everyone gets the face they deserve at age 40. And I started thinking about, our culture is probably around 40 now. I mean, if you think about the grand scope of history, maybe our best days are behind us a little bit, and, our knees are starting to give out a little bit. So I think that might be a little fair. And I think what's happening, like as I was talking to people about pop culture, I'm going down to Chicago to do this pop culture thing, and they said, well, are you going to talk about how pop culture used to be Shakespeare and now it's the Kardashians? Are we getting worse? Are we all falling apart? Are we getting dumber? Yes. But also, it's a sign of advancement because I think we're always looking for the more efficient tool. An iPhone is a more efficient tool than the old rotary phone. An iPod and Spotify are more effective tools than a phonograph. And a Kardashian is simpler than the character of Mother Courage in Bertolt Brecht. I'm very proud as a public radio host that I brought in Bertolt Brecht and Kim Kardashian in the same thought, in that same sentence. And I think fresh off that triumph, I will leave you, except to say, well, getting back to the topic, what is trending in your life? Just the same things that have always trended. Thanks.